Those days are gone, I can tell you.
She's only teasing. Go on.
He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Co. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway...
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We've got a brand new lineup every Saturday night on GB News.
From 6 p.m, I'll give you my unique take on the world today.
Then at 7, it's me, Calvin Robinson, with my Common Sense Crusade.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
5 times the opinion. Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories.
With us 4, plus a special guest.
And at 9, of course, it's Mark Dolan Tonight. Brand new Saturday nights on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Coming up on Dan Wootton Tonight, as Humza Yousaf is elected leader of a Scottish National Party in freefall, is their separatist dream now fading into the abyss? Plus, with the King said to be too busy to meet Prince Harry during his surprise visit, Celia Walden reacts to this momentous royal snub. Join Dan, Nigel Farage, Kelvin Mackenzie and more of Britain's top commentators from 9 p.m. to 11 p.m. on GB News.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories, controversies and issues.
With us 4, plus a special guest.
It's 5 times the opinion, 5 times the debate and 5 times the fun. The Saturday 5. Saturday nights from 8. Only on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
You could wink at the end. I can't Britain's wink. Listening.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. I campaigned in the largest democratic vote in our island's story. I know this country has so much to be proud of. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better. The wisdom of the nation is in its people. Vox Populi, Vox Dei. That's why I'm joining the People's Channel. Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat.
Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Today, Rishi Sunak launches his war on antisocial behaviour. They're going to ban hippie crack, but will it really work? In Scotland, they've elected a new leader of the Scottish National Party, but can Humza Yousaf actually turn things around? The illegal immigration bill's being debated in Parliament as we speak. Have the rebels backed down once again? And joining me on Talking Pints, Martin Townsend, long-time editor of the Sunday Express, probably the most Brexity newspaper in the country. But before all of that, let's get the news with Polly Middlehurst.
Nigel, thank you, and good evening to you. The top story, as Nigel was saying, Humza Yousaf has been elected as the new leader of the Scottish National Party. At 37, he becomes the youngest First Minister and first to come from an ethnic minority background. Scotland's Health Secretary claimed victory over the Finance Secretary Kate Forbes and former Community Safety Minister Ash Regan with 52% of the vote. He says he's honoured to be taking on the role.
I'm not just humbled of that, I most certainly am. I also feel like the luckiest man in the world to be standing here as a leader of the SNP, a party I joined almost 20 years ago and that I love so dearly.
Humza Yousaf. Well, as you've also been hearing, the Prime Minister says he's going to be taking a zero-tolerance approach to anti-social behaviour. Rishi Sunak has unveiled a £160 million scheme that includes forcing offenders who graffiti or commit vandalism in their communities to clean it up. The government says laughing gas will be banned by the end of the year, becoming a Class C drug. The Prime Minister said current restrictions on nitrous oxide just aren't working.
What we're going to do over the course of the spring and the summer is consult on the best way to do this to make sure that it is effective. Tackling supply is important. That's why we've gone out after county line gangs and disrupted 3,500 of them. It's why we've toughened up sentencing for drug supply. It's why the police have got this things called Project Adder, for example, which is a national programme to target drug gangs in particular. So all of those things help deal with supply.
Rishi Sunak. Now, thousands of civil servants and public sector workers are staging fresh walkouts next month. The PCS union says more than 130,000 members are striking on April the 28th in a long-running dispute over pay, pensions and job security. And, excuse me, just bringing you up to date on what's happening in the United States. We understand 3 children and 3 members of staff have been killed in a school shooting in Tennessee. The gunman at the Covenant School in Nashville has also been shot dead. Police say the gunman was a 28-year-old woman from Nashville and was armed with at least 2 semi-automatic rifles and a handgun. The private Christian elementary school has around 200 students. And returning to news at home, an oil spill in Poole Harbour could have a devastating impact on sensitive nature reserves in the area. Around 200 barrels of fluid, including crude oil, leaked from a pipeline at the Witch Farm onshore processing plant. And that's led to a major incident being declared. Poole Harbour commissioners earlier on said the pipeline operated by the gas company Perenco has been shut down. You're up to date on TV, online, DAB+ radio and on the TuneIn app. You're with GB News, the People's Channel. Time to go back to Farage.
It's a funny thing, you know, but the more decades you look at politics, you're involved in national debate, the more you realise, actually, things stay the same. One of Tony Blair's big pitches back in 1997 was tough on crime, tough on the causes of crime. Well, I have been drawing similarities over the last few weeks between Tony Blair and Rishi Sunak. Rishi is a great spinner. He never underplays anything the government does, and that includes this press conference that he did this morning. Just have a quick listen to this.
What we're going to do is ban nitrous oxide, because I think all of us for far too long have had to walk through places with the canisters and all the rest of it, and that's not acceptable. So we're going to ban nitrous oxide, and we're also going to expand the power of the police to do drug testing on arrest for far more crimes and far more drugs, and tackle the scourge of drugs.
So there we are. The Prime Minister will take on antisocial behaviour. He will take on the scourge of drugs. Michael Gove yesterday out on media saying we cannot allow our public areas to be arenas of drug taking. Well, when it comes to that, and actually antisocial behaviour at all levels, I would have thought an opinion poll would give you about 99% of the public would agree. But is any of it actually going to make any difference? And let's focus on one thing. Now, laughing gas. Nitrous oxide, or hippie crack, as it's known. Well, you all know it. You know that it's used in dentistry. It used to be used before operations in hospitals. I understand industrially it's used to make whipped cream, which I didn't know before today, I have to confess. But there is, whether you know it or not, a craze out there amongst young people. They buy these little silver canisters, they fill up a balloon and they inhale this hippie crack laughing gas. The government will ban the sale of it. But does banning things actually make any difference? Well, I wonder at home just how much you know about hippie crack, because I bet that unless you're under the age of 25, you probably don't know very much about it. Well, joining me this evening on the panel, Dr. Robert Lefevre, former GP, but importantly for this conversation, addiction specialist. What can you tell us, Dr. Robert, about nitrous oxide?
Well, nitrous oxide, as you say, is used in dentistry and is used in helping women to have more pain-free birth. But the young people use it for its euphoric effect. It gives them a high. And making it illegal is not going to have any more effect than putting cannabis into the same category that they now want to put laughing gas. It had no effect whatever. People are using cannabis as if it's going out of fashion, and they will continue to use laughing gas and nitrous oxide in exactly the same way. And making it illegal, paradoxically, will appeal to some people. They say, wow,
yeah, this must be exciting.
If it's illegal, it must be good.
Medically, you know, we know that prolonged, sustained use of cannabis, or what is sold as cannabis, which these days is often 20 times stronger than the leaf itself, the resin I'm talking about. We know there can be psychotic effects. We know it can dullen people's personality. Do we know much about the potential harms of regular use of nitrous oxide?
Well, there are people who take regular use and there are people who study them. And what they find is it has very similar effects on the damaging effects of cannabis. It damages mood, memory, and motivation. Well, those are the three things I most want in my life. If you damage mood, memory, and motivation, what have you got left?
Yes, I understand. But how do we disincentivize young people from using this stuff?
You can't. Young people will always want to individuate, which means they want to rebel, which means they want to do what their parents think was appalling. And so they will use drugs. They will use all sorts of things. Some of them.
Some of them.
Now, about 15% of the population have addictive natures. They're born with that tendency. I have that. And if you look at the Lefevre family, you'll find we're riddled with addiction. We make a speciality of it. I happen to do it professionally, but but I haven't used any mood-altering substance for the last 37 years.
For that very reason.
I'm not good at it.
Yeah,
I'm good at other things, but I'm not good at using drugs.
No, well, it's always good to identify your own weaknesses in life. Peter Blexley, former Metropolitan Police detective. We've been fighting this so-called war on drugs. I've heard it every year for the last, 30, 40 years. It doesn't feel, from a policing perspective, like we're winning.
Oh, the war on drugs cannot and will not ever be won. It's a folly. We started, yes, over 50 years ago with the Misuse of Drugs Act 1971, and it'll be that act which will now cover nitrous oxide. Rishi Sunak going against the advice of his own panel on the misuse of drugs, who said don't make it illegal. However, the drugs industry is vast, and the reason it's vast is because, as the learned doctors touched upon here, it's a very human thing to alter your mental state. It's why people have 2 sugars in a cup of tea. It's why people might enjoy a bar of chocolate or a comedy on the television, even making love, to alter our mental state. It's what makes us human beings, and drugs is a part of all that. But this entire industry is left completely in the hands of criminals. and now nitrous oxide will become a valuable asset for criminals because they'll source it. Even if the Prime Minister prevents the sale, for example, online, criminals will source it. And now we will have nitrous oxide being sold alongside other drugs in gloomy pub car parks and darkened alleyways.
There will be parents and grandparents watching you guys, listening to this, saying this is a counsel of despair. No. That actually, through better education, by warning people of the potential downside, we can limit the number of young people that take these things.
I think that's absolutely right. Education on the right things in the right way is the way forward. Now, what we need to teach in schools is the 12-step program of Alcoholics Anonymous, because from that comes Narcotics Anonymous, Overeaters Anonymous, Gamblers Anonymous, all the others. Why don't we teach people how to get well, instead of always concentrating on things that are going to cause even more damage? If you have, as in America, where 12-step programs are taught in school, you get it taken for granted that, you know, when you hear that somebody's got an addiction problem, you say, well, is he in recovery? Well, that's just jargon to us. But recovering, the process of getting rid of one's addiction so that we don't use it on a day-to-day basis and don't have that tendency anymore.
Yeah.
That's what's
well,
really
we must
important.
try. The trouble is, in America, they've moved on to things like fentanyl, and there are now 100,000 opioid deaths a year in America. Peter, we have to police somewhere, don't we?
We have to legalise and regulate. Please never separate those words. Legalise and regulate the entire illegal drugs industry. When we do that, when people can legally purchase cocaine, cannabis and the like from a regulated outlet where its manufacture has been regulated, so we know what's in it. You get a leaflet detailing its strength when you buy it, like you do with paracetamol, for example. When that entire industry is taken away from criminals who will encourage you to take more drugs, who will encourage you to take more addictive drugs so they can sell you more and make more profit, then and only then will we wrestle this industry away from criminals.
Absolutely fascinating. Thank you to both of you. And I promise you at home, these two are not anarchic screaming liberals or anything like it, but it is interesting. It is interesting. You know, there are very powerful arguments around education starting very early and around the fact that maybe we're wasting a vast amount of police time, court time, prison time on this that maybe we could spend in better ways if we got this trade out of the hands of the criminals. And I have to say, I've been tempted by this argument for many, many years. In a moment, we'll cross to the House of Commons where they are debating the illegal immigration bill. There was supposed to be a big rebellion on the backbenches today, as there was last week on a separate issue. Apparently, that rebellion has melted away. In a moment, we'll find out why. No, I thought it was a...
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Click that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions are, those days are gone, I can tell you.
She's only teasing. Go on.
He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We've got a brand new lineup every Saturday night on GB News.
From 6 p.m, I'll give you my unique take on the world today. Then at 7, it's me, Calvin Robinson, with my Common Sense Crusade.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
5 times the opinion. Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories.
With us 4, plus a special guest.
And at 9, of course, it's Mark Dolan Tonight. Brand new Saturday nights on GB News, Britain's news channel.
So they're going to ban laughing gas. Yes, hippie crack is out, and those that are caught selling it could face prison sentences, apparently, of up to 2 years. Some of your thoughts on this very interesting and I think very important debate. One viewer says, pretty sure they ban cannabis. Wonder how that's going. Rob says, silly idea. It's not going to make it any more difficult to get hold of. No, I doubt that it will. Another says to me, are there elections imminent by any chance? Heard it all before. Police won't arrest and judges won't sentence. So what's the point? And a final thought on this from Melissa, who says, yes, that will stop all the stabbings, rapes, muggings and violence. And Melissa, you're absolutely right. We've got bigger things to worry about on our streets. I just look at some of the footage of people out there on the streets of London, especially those with expensive watches and gangs with machetes mugging them. That would be a bigger concern for me. Now, as we speak, there is a debate going on in the House of Commons on the illegal immigration bill. This is where Rishi Sunak's government, with, of course, a strong Home Secretary in the shape of Suella Braverman, they've talked even tougher than Priti Patel did before. But is it really going to make any difference? The idea that people who come across the channel are deemed to have come illegally, they're detained and then deported. Is it really going to happen all the while we're under the auspices of the European Court of Human Rights? And I've got to tell you, I have my doubts. I doubt it for that reason. I also doubt it because British judges will seize upon the Human Rights Act signed into law in this country in 1998. So what we heard over the weekend was that up to 60 Conservative members of Parliament were going to lay down some amendments, some really tough amendments that said we would, as a country, ignore the rulings of the ECHR. At least that is my understanding of what this rebellion was going to be about and what the amendments being put down would say. And yet today we learn they've all been withdrawn. Has Rishi Sunak managed to fob off yet another potential division in the Conservative Party? Well, joining me is the Conservative Member of Parliament from Stoke-on-Trent, Jonathan Gullis, who joins us in his office in the House of Commons. Jonathan, welcome to the programme. Now, you know, as I understood it, you were one of the people that wanted to put down some tough amendments, and now you've withdrawn them. What's happening?
So, Nigel, we did lay those amendments. They've been debated. In fact, today, Sir Bill Cash, Danny Kruger, Simon Clarke and now John Hayes are speaking to their amendments, and I was speaking on mine in day 2 of committee tomorrow. What we have agreed, after speaking with the Home Secretary, was not to push to a vote at committee stage. That does not rule out voting at report stage. In the agreement that we will enter meaningful discussions between the Home Secretary, between the Immigration Minister and the Prime Minister to make sure that some of these amendments, or all of them ideally, can be adopted by the government, because I think it's important that we respect that those conversations can happen in private. But as I say, if we're not taken seriously, Nigel, we will not be afraid to call a vote. And it will ultimately mean that the Conservative Party will only win any division via opposition votes, which is the last thing anyone wants to see.
Jonathan, explain to us, these amendments that you want to put down and debate and want the government to incorporate. Explain to us why these amendments will make a difference.
So we've been working closely with Professor Richard Eakins, for example, from Policy Exchange, and obviously speaking with people that you speak to as well, Nigel, about how we can make sure, because as you have long pontificated about, and correctly so, these Rule 39 orders are not something that was ever written into the European Convention of Human Rights. This is something from 2005 that came in later. They're not legally binding, yet too many UK judges take them into account, and it's what stopped that plane going off to Rwanda last year. So we're saying that we should totally ignore these Rule 39 laws, make it very explicitly clear to UK judges they are not to take those into account. Another one is about disapplying sections 4, 6 and 10 of the Human Rights Act. The Prime Minister and the Home Secretary have disapplied section 3, but we think these other 3 sections are still gateways that can be used and abused by lefty lawyers and activist judges in order to prevent people from being removed. And then Sir Bill Cash's amendment, the 3 big ones that we're pushing, is about stopping these injunctions, last-minute injunctions, being put on people from being removed from UK domestic courts, and saying, if someone's unfit to fly or if someone's going to be persecuting the country we're taking them to, then we can pause their removal. But under those, everyone else is on the plane, off it goes, to Rwanda, to other safe third countries. Because if we don't deliver on this, Nigel, now with the Reform Party again, I see, you will do the damage that it with my seat in Stoke-on-Trent North. It means I will have a Labour MP, sadly, come back and ultimately have someone who's pro-open borders and pro-free movement.
Well, yeah, I mean, look, I think the Conservative government have been very pro-open borders, haven't they? I mean, even legal net migration last year was 500,000, let alone the 46,000 that crossed the English Channel. A lot of people, Jonathan, will say it doesn't make any difference, and talking tough is one thing, but delivering results is what matters. What if ultimately you get your way and the legislation is worded in the way in which you want, and yet still we get strong judgments coming out of Strasbourg, backed up by large sections of the media, backed up by British judges saying, hang on a second, Parliament can pass laws, of course it can, but we're signed up here by international treaty to the European Convention on Human Rights. I mean, we're almost back, actually, to the Brexit debate. What I'm really getting at is, rather than fiddling around the edges and hoping for a decent outcome, which I'm still very pessimistic about, wouldn't it just be more honest to say that we shouldn't be part of ECHR, that we should genuinely be sovereign when it comes to managing our borders?
So, Nigel, I'll be very clear with you. I've said it before in other interviews. I absolutely do think that the next general election, there is a case, and we should have in the Conservative Party manifesto, that we will withdraw from the ECHR, because, as you say, treaty agreements does not trump sovereignty of lawmaking in our British Parliament. Our borders are also sovereign and under the control of this UK government, and we should not have some foreign judge in Strasbourg woken up.
Well, he seems to have frozen. But look, Jonathan, I think we got the message. But Jonathan,
oh, sorry, Nigel.
Jonathan, you that's right, you dropped out briefly. Quick question to you. If the Conservatives were to put in their next manifesto that they would have a negotiation and consider leaving the ECHR, why should we believe them?
Well, I think at the end of the day, this government has been delivering on the 2019 manifesto. I've seen the levelling up agenda in my own constituency of Stoke-on-Trent North, Kidsgrove and Talk, from the 56 million levelling up fund to the 17.6 million Kidsgrove Town deal. I've seen us bring forward legislation, as we said we would, to obviously get Brexit done, to obviously make sure that we get that deal to end the frustration that was going on in Parliament, as well as other important pieces of legislation like online harms bill, which has been important to protect people. I've got constituents who have sadly lost loved ones from taking their own life due to the fact that there's these vile websites advising people on how to do it. So, I do think the government is acting. I do respect the Prime Minister, but he's trying to deliver.
But We have not taken back control of our borders, which was the key issue that got Brexit over the line and helped get people like you elected in Stoke-on-Trent. So far, you've got to be honest with me, that's been a failure.
Oh, look, I understand totally people are livid. You know, I'm not happy about the fact that I was kicking off about this issue and I think it was 2,000 to 4,000 originally. And I'm gobsmacked that it's taken, sadly, some colleagues from across the House a little while longer to jump on board this issue and understand the seriousness of it. And I totally get why the British public are fed up of seeing what was now 45,000, could be up to 70, 80,000 by the end of 2023 if we don't get this policy right and implemented. I know it is what will determine whether or not I am remaining as the Member of Parliament for Stoke-on-Trent, North Kidsgrove and Torp. And I think, Nigel, you and I both know I'm pretty vocal on this issue. I'm not being a damp rag on it. I've been pretty loud and proud, and I like to think pretty sound on the issue as well. So I'll be fighting tooth and nail to make sure we deliver, because as you say, if we don't, if this legislation ends up being another march up the hill and march back down again, that's it for the Conservative Party.
I agree with you, Jonathan. Thank you for joining us tonight here again on GB News. And I don't doubt Jonathan's sincerity, but I'm not sure I fully trust Rishi the Spinner. In a moment, the SNP have a new leader. Is that going to save them from the calamitous decline they've suffered over the last few months?
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage. Here on GB News, we will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat.
Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. I campaigned in the largest democratic vote in our island story. I know this country has so much to be proud of. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better. The wisdom of the nation is in its people. Vox Populi, Vox Dei. That's why I'm joining the People's Channel. Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Well, that's it. There is a new leader of the SNP. Hamza Yousaf has won the poll with nearly 53% of the vote against 47% to Kate Forbes. Very interesting result, actually. I mean, Kate Forbes, who's come out as this very, very strong, free Christian, been absolutely slammed by almost the entirety of Scottish media, facing resignations, demands for her to withdraw from the race. And do you know what Kate Forbes did? She stuck to her guns, she stuck to her principles, she showed, in my opinion, considerable moral courage and did far better than anybody expected. So the favourite has won, and what do we know about him? Well, what we know is that as Transport Minister, he was stopped and fined for driving without insurance. We know that along with Nicola Sturgeon, he backed a new ferry project to the islands, which still hasn't been completed, at massive and possibly, some are suggesting even fraudulent, not on behalf of the ministers, but the company's cost to the Scottish taxpayer. We know that running health, that waiting lists went up. And finally, he says that he's for gay marriage. He says that he's for the Sturgeon gender identity legislation, which ultimately brought her down. And yet, when there are big votes in Parliament on these issues, he appears conveniently not to being there, which is leading some to say or question whether he comes under pressure from his own religious community. But there you have it. Hamza Yousaf is the leader of the SNP. Does that mean he will automatically tomorrow become the First Minister of Scotland? Well, joining me is Tony Maguire, GB News Scotland reporter outside Holyrood. So, Tony, as I understand it, this SNP election has to go for a vote in the Scottish Parliament tomorrow, but the SNP don't have 50% of the members. Is there a danger that Mr Yousaf doesn't get approved?
Even if, Nigel, I would say that given the winner is Hamza Yousaf, that seems a lot less likely. Certainly there was a lot of talk about whether the SNP and the Greens would continue their power sharing agreement, the Butte House agreement, if it was Kate Forbes' name who was called out tonight, if it was her that was giving the victory speech. That hasn't come to pass though, and certainly the continuity candidate seems to be in the frame for continuous government with the Greens by his side until the end of this term. If you look actually a little bit through history, you know, last time round in 2021, Nicola Sturgeon got 64 nominations. Douglas Ross, leader of the Scottish Conservative and Unionist Party, he had 31. And if you go back a little bit further, in 2007, Alex Salmond had just won the Scottish election for the SNP for the first time, and the outgoing First Minister, Jack McConnell, he came painfully close. Alex Salmond had 49 nominations and Jack McConnell had 46. Now the rules of the game are that whoever has the most votes will get the honour of being First Minister for the continuation of this parliamentary term. Okay. We have seen other candidates from other parties put their names forward, but that's how it works tomorrow.
OK, so he doesn't need an absolute majority, he just needs the most votes of those that want to run for First Minister. That makes things very, very clear. Another thought, Tony, if I can, is that Kate Forbes expressed opinions that by modern-day standards would be considered to be very small c conservative, that her views on family, gay marriage, etc., the trans issue, etc. Doesn't the fact she got 47% of the vote once second preferences were added in show us that actually the SNP are not all these mad progressives that we thought they were under Nicola Sturgeon, and that actually on these social issues the party is very, very split?
Yes, certainly. I mean, we keep hearing that phrase, the SNP is a broad church of ideas and ideals. And certainly within 24 hours, Kate Forbes had almost tanked her campaign because of the outpour of reaction. But she pulled herself up and she came back. And actually in the last dying days of the campaign, you know, I believe that there was a bit of a scramble in the Yousaf camp because they thought that Kate Forbes would have won this on the second preference votes. Now, I think that what this campaign, the 5 weeks, 5 long weeks, has shown us is that actually the progressive part of that, progressive was one thing under Nicola Sturgeon, but I actually think that now people are waking up to the idea that progressive can be more, you know, it can be more diverse than that. Progressive is whatever takes us forward into the future and takes us in a new direction, really.
Yeah, look, I think it's really interesting. I'm sure you're right, but tomorrow will be a formality. But just in case, do stand by, because we may need you back. Chris Maguire, thank you for joining us from Holyrood this evening. Very, very good. Now, civil servant announcement, hot off the press. The PCS union have announced that their 130,000 members will be on an all-out strike on the 28th of April. But given that the latest ONS survey suggests that 48% of public servants are either working partly or fully from home, and given we know that in the first weeks of this year, Whitehall was literally half empty, if the civil servants are going on strike, how on earth would we notice? And a quick What the Farage moment. I bet you get pretty bored with your weekly and bi-weekly recycling bins. I've got 3. Many people in urban cities have 4. There are new proposals that say our recycling rate hasn't really improved since 2015, so we might have up to 7 different recycling bins. It is completely crackers. And whenever I see those pictures of shiploads of waste going off to landfill in China or elsewhere, it makes me pretty angry. I'm not sure we're doing this as well as we kid ourselves. In a moment, I'll be joined by the longtime editor of the Sunday Express, probably the most Brexity newspaper in the country. Martin Townsend joins me in a moment for Talking Pints.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Deebs & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
First and foremost, I'm a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the people's channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m, and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians
to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Yes, it's my favourite time of the day. Absolutely, it's Talking Pints with Martin Townsend. Martin, welcome.
Lovely to be here.
Thank you. The programme. Now, we will, of course, talk about your 18 years editing a Sunday newspaper, but I want to go back to the beginning.
OK.
Because I find this interesting. You came from a relatively humble background, but you're clearly bright. You pass your 11 plus. You go to a grammar school.
Yes.
The same grammar school that Michael Portillo
yes.
of this parish went to.
Indeed.
Do you think that the opportunity you had from a modest background to go to a grammar school was one of the key things that helped you get on?
100%. Absolutely 100%, yeah. Because I was from a very humble background. I grew up on a council estate. My parents always wanted me to get on, but didn't push me in any one particular direction. And I got the chance to go to a grammar school, and immediately I got there. You know, it was run like a private school, like a public school. So we had house system. You know, we played rugby. I wasn't a great rugby player, I have to say, or cricket particularly. But of course, the teachers there, the masters, were absolutely exemplary. And I was very lucky at that school to have an English master who absolutely encouraged me to write, which is all I ever really wanted to do. I wasn't much cop at anything else, really, if I'm honest.
Very important in life.
Indeed.
I think you're good at.
Well, and he was incredibly encouraging and incredibly encouraging with my parents, and he pushed me in the direction of, you know, because I was having the usual career things as you do, and in the 70s, if you were good at writing or good at English, you were immediately say to you, you need to be a social worker. It always went the same way. But of course, I had Mr. Golland. I'll give him a name check actually. James Golland, who was my English master, and he was saying to my parents, he has to write. You have to get him to write, and that's when the idea of going into journalism.
I think it's really interesting because I mean, I don't know about you, but I feel that the closure of hundreds of grammar schools all over the country has perhaps denied a lot of boys and girls from your background.
Oh, absolutely. I mean,
the
of course,
opportunity.
Theresa May did talk about, didn't she, at one time? I think it was going to plan to reopen
for about 5 minutes.
500, yeah, for about 5 minutes, and I thought that was a fantastic. I mean, basically, they became the kind of gold standard in an area. And what happened in Harrow, where I was, is you had Harrow County Grammar School, and then you had other schools around, and they all kind of came up around it, really. And it was just a remarkable thing.
No, it's really interesting.
Yeah.
But off you go into the big wide world.
Yes.
And it's music and journalism.
Yes.
This is where Martin Townsend finishes up. And I understand you can actually sing a bit as well.
Well, I sang, I did. I sang on one of Paul Young's singles, which ironically was called I'm Only Fooling Myself, which I don't know if ever that was a joke at my expense. I suspect it was. But anyway, yeah, I happened to be interviewing him one afternoon. He said, I'm going into the studio, I'm making this record, can you sing at all? I said, well, actually, yeah, I'm OK. I can sing a bit, I can hold a tune. So he got me in and I sang backing vocals on this, and you can hear me just about on this record.
No, it's pretty cool.
And it went on, and that was on his greatest hits, and it won. I am entitled to a gold record. I've never claimed it from him.
Good Lord.
But yeah, I could have a gold record on my wall.
I reckon that's
which is
pretty
quite nice.
Good.
Yeah.
Now, that whole world of music journalism, this is pre the internet.
Yes.
There were all sorts of newspapers, magazines. It's a very active and very competitive world, wasn't it?
Yeah, it absolutely was. We had the New Musical Express, the Melody Maker, Record Mirror, which I worked for briefly. That's where I met Paulie Yates for the first time. And it was extraordinarily, it was a great time for publishing all round at that time. I mean, you know, there were magazines about everything, but yeah, the music press was incredible, really. And I worked at at that time, my big breakthrough really was working for a thing called Number One magazine, which was IPC's answer to Smash Hits. And of course, Smash Hits was the big pop magazine, the one that had Neil Tennant from the Pet Shop Boys working for it. But we were weekly, they were fortnightly. And we kind of gradually sort of started to catch up with them and sort of get our own relationships with people at the time like Duran Duran and Frankie Goes to Hollywood. And I got to meet all these people.
These big 80s names. And 80s music was kind of upbeat and optimistic, wasn't it?
It was. And you know, they wore brightly coloured Anthony Price suits. They made incredibly expensive videos. I mean, one of the reasons for that, actually, was, of course, the arrival of the CD, because it meant that the record companies could sell all the same music to people all over again on CD. People would chuck away their, at that time, chuck away their vinyl.
And vinyl's back now.
Vinyl's back now. And, of course, they were making money all over again. So that was why there was so much money.
Quite logically, you went a bit deeper into this, and it was showbiz, wasn't it?
Yeah, yeah. I did showbiz I joined Today newspaper with Eddie Shah.
Yep.
I was pop editor over there, but also doing a bit of showbiz. And I left there after about 18 months, 2 years, and went freelance and did showbiz for most of the national newspapers. Yeah, really enjoyed it.
And showbiz pop. And we're now talking about the world of the Beckhams.
Yes.
All these big people. And Paulie Yates we'll come back to in a moment. But of all those big stars that you met and interviewed, who did you really like? Who did you really dislike?
Well, I'm just going to sound awful, but I liked most of them, actually. There wasn't very many people I fell out with. The first ever interview I did was with a guy called George Benson, who I'd always been a huge fan of George. And we had this amazing interview, and we were drinking these vodka screwdrivers. It was getting to be a better and better interview. And he was such great company, and he's such a great artist as well, and it was just such a pleasure to meet him. So I will always remember that one, because that was the first big interview I did. I think over the years, the one that I enjoyed the most, probably, looking back on it, was Roy Orbison, because it was such a privilege to meet him. And he said such interesting things about his music, about the dreamlike quality of his music, which really appealed to me, and I just thought he was an extraordinary man.
Now, the relationship with the very troubled, and in the end very tragic, Paulie Yates, actually was the subject not that long ago, of a big Channel 4 documentary, which you were very much at the helm of. It's a long time since she died, and yet the interest in her still appears to be there. Yeah, and I was really surprised by that, if I'm honest, because when she died, which I think was in 2000, she seemed to be forgotten really quickly. And I was quite upset about that. I thought, Paula's gone, you know. I mean, I was very close to her. I was friends with her, and, you know, I missed her because she was it's just great fun to be around. Yeah. But somehow the world had moved on and nobody seemed to want to know about Paula. And funnily enough, a couple of years ago, I actually suggested to someone, why don't we do something on Paulie Yates? And they said, oh, no one's interested. In fact, when that production company came along and suggested it, I said, well, I've got these tapes, you know, some of the last interviews she did, all of the last interviews she did, to be fair. She's saying some extraordinarily interesting things on there, really emotional things on there about where she is in her life and the way she's been persecuted by the media and all of this sort of stuff, which oftentimes can be a bit dull. Everyone claims to be persecuted by the media, but actually Paula probably did have a bit of a case for that. And what they did was they separated Paula out from the kind of Bob Geldof dramas, and they gave Paula back her personality and her character as a person in TV here who was really important to Channel 4 and everybody. Very interesting project.
Yeah.
But you do all of this stuff. OK magazine, and you're now working for Richard Desmond, and suddenly there's a complete 180. And Martin Townsend becomes the editor of the Sunday Express. Yes. And he's now doing serious stuff.
Yes, yeah. Which was a shock to everybody. You know, and I was getting a lot of flack for that, because people said, well, you know, he's a showbiz edit. He's a showbiz. But, you know, lots of people came from that side of things. Piers Morgan came from that side of things. I remember Piers saying something really interesting about editing a newspaper, and it was something along the lines of it takes you about 5 years to actually learn to do it properly. I think he said 5 years. I'd hate to misquote Mr Morgan. But it did take me 2 or 3 years, at least, to really get into the swing of it.
Well, you lasted 18 years.
And I lasted 18, yes.
And you were a stable for young journalists that worked for you, Martin, that went on to become political editors of the Sunday Times, and, of course, Camilla Tominey, who's with us on Sunday mornings here. And all of that's quite rewarding. But I was with you at quite a big moment in the Express newspaper's history. I was having an extended lunch with Richard Desmond, and I think you knew roughly where this was going, didn't you?
I did.
Desmond called you in. I was in the room. Hugh Whitto was editing the Daily, and Richard says, right, that's it. We've made our minds up. This newspaper group is going to back leaving the European Union. We're going to support Nigel. I mean, I was astonished. That at the time, I mean, the rest of Fleet Street thought the Express had gone mad.
Yeah. Well, it was a strange moment for me because
You had your reservations.
I did have.
I could see it in your face.
I did have reservations, and the reason was that I knew the readers were Conservative voters.
Yeah.
But I also knew that I'd never, ever had a single letter that was positive about the EU.
Not one.
Not one. And I also knew that if I ever put the EU on the front of the paper about EU waste or something, all those kind of stories, my sale would go down. Really, it would just plummet. And the reason for that, I found out from talking to the readers, was they didn't feel there was ever any hope of leaving the EU. Yeah. And if you present readers with a story that offers them no hope, no hope at all, they'd switch off. And so I stopped doing it. I stopped doing these EU, but the moment there was a sniff of Brexit, the moment there was a sniff of we might be able to get out of Europe.
They could be enjoined in battle.
Suddenly, you put Brexit on the front of the paper and the sales went up.
Yeah, well, you put me on the front a few times.
I put you on the front quite a few times, yeah. And it was an extraordinary thing.
Well, it turned out that just as the Express was the only newspaper that really understood the threat that Hitler posed in the 1930s.
Yes.
The Express were the first on this as well. Well, amazing career, 18 years. I mean, Richard Desmond, how did you cope with him? Because he speaks his mind, doesn't he?
Yeah, I mean, he's larger than life. He was always larger than life. I learnt a lot from him. And I know people say he was ruthless. He could be ruthless. He could be very difficult, like a lot of successful people. But he was a very exciting person to be around because he achieved an awful lot, and it was great to be around that kind of energy. And I learnt a lot from his energy. I learnt a lot from his ability to want to have something done and to get it done quickly. So, because it was all immediate. If he wanted something done, it had to be done tomorrow. And it got me into that discipline. And I learned an awful lot, actually, about him, about the technical side of what sells magazines, what sells newspapers.
Just an extraordinary bloke.
Yeah.
And now you've left that big... You're at Pagefield, PR consultants.
Yeah.
Life must be a little bit more sedate now.
Kind of. I've just had a weekend. I've got to say this. I've just had a weekend that's been extraordinary because Bart's Hospital, which is one of our clients, celebrated its 900th birthday on Saturday. It was absolutely fantastic. They're building a brand new breast cancer centre, brand new clinical research facility with the help of Bart's charity, who collect the money from donors and make sure that these big projects can happen, because obviously the NHS can't afford to do this stuff. It has to be something that's done through donations, which has always been the way with Bart's as well. They've had a long history of being supported. You can go into the Great Hall there and see all the donations.
Unbelievable.
It's an amazing place. So for me, it's been just a fantastic weekend. Pagefield is a great place to work. I really enjoy it. I've had a lot of fun.
Well,
I've now got a new career, so...
You've enjoyed yourself with everything you've done.
I have.
Including, I hope, coming on Talking Pints.
Really enjoyed it.
Splendid. Martin,
Thanks, Nigel. Thank you very much.
OK, a couple of Barrages, the Farages. What have you got for me today? Robbie asks, does Matt Hancock now have all the right credentials to be elevated to the House of Lords? Yes, absolutely, including wanting to sell his services for £10,000 a day. I would have thought he was ideally suited to the current makeup of the upper house. He will love it. One viewer asks, the fishing communities earned over £100 million more last year through Brexit, with more to come. Why is so little said about this in the news? I'll tell you why so little said. This is pure spin being put out. The British fishing industry is being allowed to catch a few more of its own fish in what should be our territorial waters. I can tell you in the southeast of England, we are suffering devastating destruction of fish stocks, more foreign vessels fishing on the 6 Mile line than ever before, and a blitz of regulations coming in for the small fishing fleet that will drive many of them out of business. I'm going to be doing a big piece on this later this week. Now, Jacob Rees-Mogg, Illegal immigration being discussed over the road.
Yes.
What have you got
We're
tonight
actually
for us?
talking about how net zero is making people poorer because the costs of energy are going up. New reports come out saying the price could be 93% higher than it would otherwise be, and the effect this has, particularly in the cost of living crisis.
Cost of living crisis, and of course, it's expensive to manufacture things in Britain as well.
We're less competitive than other nations. Yeah, we're really damaging our own interest. But I've got a brilliant guest on who's part of the Extinction Rebellion and threw tomato soup over Van Gogh. So we'll see what happens.
Well, good luck with that. First of all, let's get the all-important weather.
Hello again. A fine end to Monday, but as we go into Tuesday, well, it's going to turn wet once again. More rain on the way from the west. A large area of low pressure actually is sitting in the Atlantic, and that's going to send various weather features our way. We've started the week with high pressure, and we keep that at least for the first half of the night, and that will allow skies to clear with just some rain and sleet affecting Shetland. Otherwise, most places dry. And with those clear spells, temperatures falling away, -3 or -4 Celsius possible for northeastern parts of Scotland. A chilly night to come as well for eastern England. But further west, temperatures actually rising through the night as the next system moves in. That will bring thickening cloud and some outbreaks of rain first thing on Tuesday. So a wet start for Northern Ireland, western Scotland into western parts of England and Wales. Those spells of rain pushing northeastwards through the morning so that most places are damp by the end of the morning. And by lunchtime, that rain reaching the far north of Scotland. With all the cloud and the rain, it's not going to feel very pleasant out there. It's going to stay on the chilly side in the east, but Northern Ireland likely to brighten up. A few showers here, but otherwise temperatures reaching 14 Celsius, and so that will feel a bit milder. Those showers also pushing into western Scotland, parts of Wales and the southwest by the end of the afternoon and into the evening. A lot of cloud remaining overnight as well, so I don't think Wednesday's going to start off particularly chilly. Perhaps northern Scotland with some breaks in the cloud. We'll see a touch of frost in sheltered spots. Otherwise, too much cloud, too much wind to lead to a frost, and in some places temperatures holding up in the double figures, especially towards the south and southwest. But it's towards the south and southwest where we've got the next system moving in, a spell of rain, an hour or two of wet weather moving through during Wednesday morning to push into Northern Ireland by lunchtime, as well as northwest England, North Wales and the Midlands. That then sweeps across the country during the rest of Wednesday, followed by an awful lot of showers on Thursday, some sunshine in between, and in the sunshine feeling warm.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, "No, stop arguing." I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB